Hi, my name is Katherine, and this is my video journal for my AP US History class, and I'll be talking to you about Chapter 30 in the American Pageant, which is about the year 1917 to 1918, America entering World War I. So, this chapter is very important because it represents a huge shift in the role of government in the US. In 1916, when Woodrow Wilson was running for re-election, he based his entire campaign on the slogan, "He kept us out of war." So Woodrow Wilson ran on a neutrality platform, but within 1 year of being re-elected, he threw America into the greatest conflict that the world had ever known, World War I. So the reason that Woodrow Wilson did this is because Germany, who had previously had sort of a tentative peace treaty with the US, declared unrestricted naval warfare on anyone, any ships of any country. So suddenly, the US commercial trading overseas was highly in danger. And then with the release of the Zimmerman Note, our borders were immediately threatened. So the US had been thriving under neutrality. Our trade with Britain was going strong and our economy was booming. So the public interest was not in going to war. We thought that this was a European war, we had no place in fighting it, and we didn't want to get involved in a European entanglement, a precedent that had been set by George Washington in his term in office. European entanglements were not for us to deal with. But Woodrow Wilson realized that it was in the national interest, even if it wasn't in the public interest, to go to war in order to protect ourselves and to provide defense to our commercial shipping and our borders and what America stood for at that time. So this is where the role of government shift comes in. World War I and this year was the first time in history that the government had taken on the role of mobilizing the national mindset towards war, with extreme mass media campaigns, propaganda, and a prominent figurehead, Woodrow Wilson. So suddenly the government played this huge social role in controlling the idea of the national thought, which was go into World War I. So Woodrow Wilson was seen as an idealist by a lot of people, kind of infamously as an idealist. And he took this kind of sense of himself and used it very practically, not idealistically, but very practically, to propagate America entering World War I. He had this great quote that said, "Some people accuse me of being an idealist, which is how I know I'm an American, because America is the only idealistic nation on earth." So when Woodrow Wilson says this, he inspires a lot of Americans to think about America as this idealistic nation, this pinnacle for other nations to aspire to, a beacon of hope. So when you have this very heartwarming national image, you want to fight for it, even if the war seems far removed from your own life. Woodrow Wilson really harnessed this idea, and he painted America's entry into World War I as the propagation of making democracy free in the world, protecting the freedom of democracy in the world, protecting what America stood for on a global scale. This is a really romanticized idea of war, and it was spread everywhere with mass media campaigns, Wilson speaking all over the country. This was a huge deal, and the American national interest suddenly became all about war. All the papers supported it. There were all of these campaigns for Meatless Mondays and Wheatless Wednesdays, which were helping provide soldiers with food. Women stepped up to fill the roles of men who had gone overseas. The war became almost a driver, a frenzy, sort of religious revival experience. People were revved up. They were stoked about this. And once we were in the war, Woodrow Wilson continued this sort of propaganda. He continued to play the role of government to control what the people were thinking and to paint America as this beacon of hope continuously. So with the help of Creel and these 4-Minute Men and all of the publications that Creel put out with this federal bureau intended to propagate the war, Wilson became sort of this idol of democracy. He himself was painted as the leader of the American dream, the person who was going to spread the American dream globally by defeating this evil Kaiser of Germany. So by the time the Treaty of Versailles was being drafted after the end of World War I, Wilson was welcomed on an international scale as this sort of apotheosis of what America stood for. And we hadn't really seen this historically since President Washington's first term in office when they wanted to crown him king. I mean, this was like a fever for Woodrow Wilson, which was a huge shift in the role of government where the executive was gaining immense power and was using this idealism to drive the American political actions, which is something that we did not see in the Gilded Age. So that's a huge shift in World War I. And the most important part of this chapter is that shifting role of government, led mostly by Woodrow Wilson. Eventually, he was a fallen idol and he blew it, but for that while, the role of government was based solely on the idealism of one, almost, then I tentatively say, demagogue-type leader. This was a very moralistic, ethically imperative war for the American people, which is a very interesting comparison to the wars we had fought earlier in history. And that's why everyone should read Chapter 30 in the American Pageant. Thank you.